I used to believe that life unraveled slowly, little threads coming loose one by one. But I was wrong. Sometimes everything breaks in a single night, with a single sentence spoken by someone you thought would never hurt you. It was December 23rd, the night before Christmas Eve, and our house glowed with warm lights and cinnamon-scented candles. I'd spent the afternoon preparing my husband's favorite meal, imagining a quiet holiday together. After 31 years of marriage, I thought we were moving into a softer, gentler chapter of our lives. I didn't realize I was living in the last chapter. Elijah walked into the kitchen still wearing his overcoat, his hair dusted with snow as if he'd walked through a dream he didn't intend to share. He didn't kiss my cheek. He didn't smile. He didn't even remove his scarf. "We need to talk," he said. And his voice wasn't the man I knew. It was someone who had already made a decision. My hands froze over the cutting board. "Is something wrong?" He avoided my eyes. "I'm leaving, Mara." I laughed instinctively because the alternative was to collapse. Leaving what? Dinner? The room? What does that mean? He finally looked at me, and I wish he hadn't. His eyes weren't angry or sad. They were resigned, empty, detached. "I've met someone," he said quietly, "and I can't pretend anymore." I gripped the edge of the counter as the world blurred. "Someone? How long?" "6 months," he replied, almost bored, as if discussing the weather. "Her name is Lila. She's younger, and she makes me feel alive." Alive. The word struck deeper than the betrayal. "And I don't?" I whispered. He didn't answer. Silence can be crueler than lies. He collected a suitcase I didn't know he had packed days ago. He paused at the doorway only long enough to say, "I'm sorry, Mara. I didn't want to ruin Christmas." But he already had. When the door clicked shut, the house felt colder than the winter outside. I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the smells of a holiday we would never share again. 31 years, reduced to a final apology and a suitcase rolling down the walkway. I didn't cry right away. I wandered the house like a ghost, touching the sofa where we used to fall asleep during movies, brushing my fingers along the mantel where our wedding photo still stood. Everything felt wrong, as if I had stepped into the life of a stranger. By midnight, I found myself outside, walking through the empty streets without a coat, without a plan, just moving because staying still hurt too much. Snow fluttered around me, quiet and indifferent. That's when I reached the town square, and that's when I saw him. A man curled under a bus shelter, shivering violently, his socks soaked through, his bare feet turning a frightening shade of grayish blue. A stranger. A moment. A decision that would change everything. But I didn't know, not then, that helping that freezing stranger would drag me into a world I never imagined, and revealed the truth about myself I had been afraid to see.
Before we continue, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any part of this story. Your support keeps these stories alive. The snow was falling harder now, turning the empty town square into a white blur. I stood there shivering, unsure whether I'd walked there or simply drifted with the storm. My thoughts were a tangled mess. Elijah, the other woman, 31 years reduced to rubble. I wanted to disappear into the snow and let the world bury the evening for good. Then I saw movement under the dim street lamp. A man lay huddled on the bench near the bus shelter, his arms wrapped tightly around his thin jacket. At first, I thought he was just sleeping, but the violent tremors shaking his body told a different story. His feet, bare, red, wet, rested directly on the icy concrete. No shoes, no socks thick enough to protect him. Just frostbite waiting to finish what life had already started. I forgot my heartbreak. I remembered my humanity. I hurried toward him. "Sir, can you hear me?" His eyes flickered open, startlingly green despite the cold closing in on him. He tried to sit up but winced. "I'm okay," he whispered, though his voice trembled. "Just need a little warmth." "No," I said gently. "You need help, and you need it now." For a moment he smiled, as if surprised anyone had stopped. "People usually keep walking." I didn't have the strength to explain that I was walking away from my own wreckage. "My name is Mara. What's yours?" "Jonas," he murmured. His teeth chattered so hard I worried he might faint. I looked down at my boots, sturdy leather, insulated, dry. They were the only reason my feet weren't suffering as badly as his. I knew what I had to do. "Jonas, I want you to put these on." I sat on the edge of the bench and began undoing my laces. "What are you doing?" he gasped. "You'll freeze." "You're worse off than I am," I said, pulling them off despite the biting cold hitting my socks immediately. "Take them." He shook his head weakly. "No one gives up their shoes in weather like this. That's madness." "Maybe," I said, sliding the first boot onto his shaking foot, "but sometimes madness is just kindness with urgency." He exhaled a shaky laugh. "You're something else, Mara." I didn't answer. I was too focused on getting him into those boots and too overwhelmed by the sting of snow on my own feet. Once they were on, Jonas closed his eyes and let out a breath that sounded like relief for the first time in days. "You saved me," he said. I stood, wrapping my arms around myself. "Just get somewhere warm, okay? A shelter, a cafe, anywhere with heat." He nodded, but before I could step away, he reached into his coat and handed me something small wrapped in cloth. "Take this," he said. "It's all I have left, and it's the only thing worth anything to me." I stared at him, confused. "What is it?" Jonas looked me in the eyes with a seriousness that froze me in place. He said, "A promise, and you're going to need it more than you know." I stared at the small cloth bundle Jonas had placed in my hands. It was surprisingly warm, as if he'd kept it close to his body for a long time. My fingers trembled, not from the cold this time, but from the weight of the moment. It felt intimate, strange, and oddly significant. "You don't have to give me anything," I said gently. "I didn't help you to get something in return." His lips twitched into a faint smile. "That's exactly why you deserve it." The words settled around us like falling snow, soft but heavy with meaning. Jonas tried to stand, but his legs buckled slightly. I instinctively reached out to steady him. His hands were rough, cold, but steadying themselves. He gripped the bench for balance. "There's a 24-hour diner on Pine Street," I said. "It's warm, and the owner won't kick you out if you buy a coffee." He nodded. "I know it. Been a while since I could afford even that." "I can give you something." "No." He shook his head with surprising firmness. "You gave enough." I opened my mouth to argue, but something in his eyes stopped me. It wasn't pride. It was something deeper, a kind of quiet dignity that hadn't yet been crushed by the world. "Promise me one thing," he said softly. I waited. "Don't open that until you're alone."
I instinctively tightened my grip on the bundle. Why? You'll understand, and when you do, don't be afraid of what comes next. His words sent a strange chill through me, one that had nothing to do with the winter wind whipping through the square. Jonas straightened slowly, testing the fit of the boots. They were too big, but they would protect him. He looked down at them with an expression I didn't expect, gratitude mixed with something like sorrow. Thank you, Mara. Not for the boots, but for seeing me. And then he turned and began walking through the snow, the dim streetlights catching on his figure until he disappeared into the storm. I stood there barefoot in the slush, my socks soaking through, my skin turning numb. But somehow my heart felt warmer, lighter. I walked home slowly, every step sending sharp needles of cold up my legs. By the time I reached my front porch, I could barely feel my toes. My house looked exactly as I had left it, warm lights glowing through the windows, dinner on the table untouched, Elijah's absence echoing in every corner. Inside, I collapsed on the couch and peeled off my soaked socks. My feet burned as sensation returned, but I barely noticed. I was focused on the cloth bundle in my hands. I hesitated. What could possibly be inside? What promise could a man with nothing give? Finally, I unwrapped the cloth, slowly, carefully, as if opening something fragile. When I saw what lay inside, my breath caught, not from fear, but from recognition, because the object Jonas had given me wasn't random. It was something connected to a past I thought I'd buried forever.
Inside the cloth lay a small, oval-shaped locket, tarnished, scratched, but unmistakably mine. I nearly dropped it. No, that's not possible, I whispered. My fingers trembled as I lifted it from the fabric. The delicate hinge was worn, one side dented. The front still bore the tiny engraving my mother had chosen. To Mara, keep your heart open. My throat tightened. I hadn't seen this locket in nearly 20 years. Not since the night my brother disappeared. My mind flashed back. The frantic search, the police lights, the endless questions. The locket had vanished from my coat pocket that same night. I had always assumed it had fallen somewhere in the chaos while I searched the streets for him. I mourned it for years, not just because it was a piece of my mother, but because losing it felt like losing the last thing that connected me to my family before grief tore everything apart. And now here it was, in my hands, delivered by a freezing stranger I'd met on a snowy night. My pulse hammered. How did Jonas have this? Why give it to me? Who was he? I hurried to the kitchen, switching on the brighter lights, examining every curve of the metal to make sure it wasn't simply a look-alike. When I pressed the tiny latch, the locket popped open with a soft click. Inside were the same two photos, my mother, smiling with her wild curls, and me, age 10, missing my two front teeth. It was real. A wave of dizziness washed over me, and I gripped the counter to keep myself upright. Why would a homeless stranger have something this personal? It wasn't logical. It wasn't random. It was intentional. I replayed our encounter in my mind, the way he looked at me, the way he spoke, the strange urgency in his voice when he said, "I'd need this." It didn't feel like coincidence. I wrapped the locket in the cloth again and clutched it to my chest. I needed answers, but Jonas was gone, swallowed by the snowstorm, and I didn't even know where he slept, where he spent his nights, or whether he'd survived the cold long enough for me to find him again.
The house around me felt suddenly different, no longer hollow from Elijah's departure, but full of secrets I didn't understand. I sank onto the couch, my bare feet tucked beneath me, and stared at the locket for a long time. A whisper of fear threaded through my thoughts. Not about Jonas, but about finding him again might reveal. And yet, underneath the fear was something else. Hope. The kind I hadn't felt since childhood. The kind that made me believe that maybe, just maybe, the universe wasn't finished with me yet. I closed my eyes and breathed slowly. Tomorrow, I would search for Jonas, not because of the locket, though that mattered, but because something inside me told me this man was connected to a story far larger than my broken marriage. But I didn't know that the search for Jonas would lead me to someone who had been watching me for far longer than I realized, and that my life was about to be pulled into a world I never knew existed.
I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jonas's trembling hands, the way he looked at me as if he knew me, really knew me. And the locket I had mourned for 2 decades, it sat on my nightstand like a silent question. By morning, the snowfall had stopped, leaving the town washed in white. I bundled up in an old pair of boots I found in the back of my closet, too tight, but better than nothing, and stepped outside. The cold bit at my cheeks as I headed downtown. I didn't have a plan. Jonas could be anywhere. He might have moved to another block to avoid the harsh wind. He could have found shelter. He could have collapsed somewhere unseen. That last thought quickened my pace. I started with the diner I'd mentioned to him. The bell over the door jingled as I stepped inside. Warm air and the smell of frying bacon enveloped me. A waitress with tired eyes approached. "Morning, hun. Just one?" "Actually," I said, "I'm looking for someone, a man maybe in his 50s, green eyes, wearing boots way too big for him. Might have come in last night." She frowned and shifted her weight. "Lot of people come through after storms. What happened? He in trouble?" "He was cold. I just want to make sure he's okay." Recognition flickered in her expression. "Oh, him. Yeah, he came in around 2 in the morning. Barely made it through the door, shaking like a leaf." "Is he still here?" "No. Paid for a coffee and a sandwich. Sat for an hour, then left. Didn't say where he was going." Paid. That word struck me. "With what?" I asked. "He didn't have money." The waitress shrugged. "Gave the cook something, some kind of metal token. I didn't get a good look. He said it was valuable." A metal token? Something else he'd been carrying? Another mystery. I thanked her and stepped outside again, scanning the street. A few shops were opening. A bus was pulling away from the curb. Pedestrians marched through the slush, none of them Jonas. I kept searching, behind the library, near the pedestrian bridge, and the small park next to the hardware store. I asked people if they'd seen him. Most hadn't. A few shook their heads without listening. Hours passed. By noon, my feet ached and my fingers were numb. I sat on a bench outside the old post office, frustration prickling at the corners of my eyes. Why did this matter so much? Why couldn't I just accept that I'd helped a stranger and move on? Because the stranger wasn't just a stranger. He had my mother's locket, and he knew my name before I offered it to him. I took a deep breath and pulled the cloth bundle out again, studying it as though the answer might be written on the metal. That's when I felt someone staring at me. Not a passing glance, a deliberate, unblinking gaze. I turned slowly. A man in a dark coat stood at the corner of the street, watching me with an intensity that made my stomach tighten.
His expression wasn't hostile, but it wasn't friendly either. As soon as our eyes met, he stepped towards me. And when he spoke my name, before I ever told him who I was, I realized Jonas wasn't the only stranger connected to my past.
He approached with calm, measured steps, his coat brushing lightly against the wind. Something about the way he moved, controlled, deliberate, made my pulse quicken. He wasn't lost. He wasn't wandering. He was coming directly for me. "Mara Hayes," he said, stopping a few feet away. My breath caught. "How do you know my name?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied my face with unsettling precision, as though comparing me to a memory. His eyes were a deep, steel-gray color, cool, but not unkind. "He've been trying to find you," he finally said. I stood up, heart pounding. "Why? Who are you?" "My name is Adrian Cross." He reached into his coat and pulled out a black leather wallet. Not a police badge, not an ID, just a wallet he held without opening. A gesture meant to reassure me he wasn't hiding anything, or maybe the opposite. "And how do you know who I am?" I asked, folding my arms to mask the trembling in my hands. "You helped someone last night, a man who needed you." "Jonas," I whispered. The slightest flicker of approval passed through his eyes. "Yes, him." "Do you know him?" I asked quickly. "Is he okay? Where is he?" Adrian didn't move closer, but his voice lowered, as if we were being watched. "Jonas is difficult to explain, but he trusted you. That's not something he does lightly." A cold ripple slipped down my spine. Trusted me with what? "Did he give you something?" Adrian asked gently. I instinctively tightened my grip on the cloth bundle in my pocket. His gaze dropped briefly to the movement. He noticed. He noticed everything. "I don't know what I gave him," I lied. Adrian exhaled, a mixture of patience and something like pity. "You're not in danger, Mara. But Jonas doesn't give away pieces of his past without a reason. People have been searching for him, and now they'll be searching for you." The words landed like a weight in my chest. "Why me? I don't know anything about him." "That's the point." Adrian's voice softened. "You helped him with no motive, no agenda. That makes you the only person he can trust." My throat tightened. He was freezing. He needed help. That's all. Most people would have kept walking, and most people have. Silence stretched between us, thick with uncertainty. "Where is he now?" I asked. Adrian hesitated for the first time. "Gone. He left before sunrise." "Why? He could have died out there." A shadow passed across Adrian's expression. "Jonas has survived things far worse than the cold." I swallowed hard. "So what do you want from me?" "I want you to be careful, and I want you to call me if you see him again, before you speak to anyone else." The wind picked up, swirling snow around us. He reached into his coat and handed me a simple business card. No title, just a phone number embossed in silver. "Why do I need to call you?" I asked. "Because," he said quietly, "Jonas wasn't the only one watching you last night." And when I turned to see who Adrian meant, I realized someone had been following me since dawn, someone who didn't care whether I made it home at all.
I whipped around so fast that my scarf snagged on the bench. The street was nearly empty, just a couple walking a dog in a delivery van idling outside a bakery. But on the far side of the post office, half hidden behind the brick wall, stood a figure. Still, silent, watching. My breath caught. I couldn't make out details, just the outline of a man in a heavy coat, the shape too rigid to be casual, too motionless to be harmless. "Is that who you meant?" I whispered to Adrian. But when I turned back, Adrian was gone. Gone. No sound, no footsteps, no retreating figure. It was as if he had evaporated into the cold air. I spun back toward the alley. The shadowy figure had moved. 2 steps closer. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. I grabbed my purse, ready to run, but my boots, too small and stiff, slowed me down. I forced myself to stay standing, to breathe. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he was just passing through. But then his head tilted slightly, as if he were studying me or confirming something. I took a step backward. He took another step forward. Panic surged. I jumped off the sidewalk and hurried down the street, weaving between parked cars. My breath formed frantic clouds in the air. I didn't look back until I reached the next block. He was still following. Not running, not calling out, just walking at that same steady, chilling pace. I ducked into the first shop I saw, a small bookstore I'd visited once years before. The bell chimed sharply as I entered. The elderly owner looked up from her counter. "Cold day to be out and about," she said kindly. I nodded, pressing a shaky hand to the glass door. I peered outside. The figure had stopped at the corner, just out of sight from the store's front windows, waiting. "Mara?" The sound of my name made every muscle in my body tense. But when I turned back, relief washed through me. It was Daniel, the owner's son, someone I vaguely knew from community events. Friendly, soft-spoken, safe. "You okay?" he asked, noticing my pale face. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I hesitated. I didn't know him well enough to tell the truth. Just a long morning. Daniel frowned, his brow creasing with concern. "We're about to close for lunch, but you're welcome to stay for a bit." I managed a grateful smile. "Thank you. I might." He returned to the back room, leaving me alone among the shelves, the warm scent of old books grounding me. I sank into a corner chair, trying to slow my breathing. What was happening? How did Jonas know about my locket? Who was Adrian really? And who was the man in the alley? This was more than coincidence, more than kindness repaid, more than a chance encounter. My fingers curled around the cloth-wrapped locket in my pocket. Whatever Jonas had placed in my hands had set something into motion, something I wasn't prepared for. The bell chimed again. Footsteps echoed through the store. But when I looked up, it wasn't Daniel returning. It was the man from the alley. And when he stepped forward and said the one sentence that froze my blood, I knew my past had just collided with my present in the most dangerous way imaginable. The man from the alley stepped into the bookstore as if he had every right to be there. The bell above the door jingled, cheerful and utterly out of place compared to the icy dread crawling up my spine. He closed the door gently behind him, too gently. His coat was heavy, dark, still dusted with melting snow. He wasn't wild or disheveled. He wasn't a vagrant or a drunk or someone lost. He carried himself like a man who always knew his next step. And he spoke my name. Mara. Just my name. Steady, calm, spoken like a fact he had known for years. I stood slowly from the chair, gripping the bookshelf behind me for support. "How do you know me?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked around the bookstore, scanning the corners, exits, windows, assessing the space like a trained professional might. When his eyes returned to mine, they were uncomfortably sharp, the kind of gaze that felt like it could peel back layers you didn't want exposed. "You have something that belongs to us," he said softly. Us. The word chilled me more than the winter storm outside. "I don't know what you're talking about," I managed. His lips curled into the faintest hint of a smile, one with no warmth in it. "You do. Jonas handed it to you last night, wrapped in cloth." My chest tightened. The locket. Of course, that's what this was about, or part of it. I slipped one hand discreetly into my coat pocket, feeling its familiar shape. "It's mine," I said. "It was mine long before he gave it to me." He tilted his head slowly, like someone examining a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. "Maybe so, but Jonas doesn't give away objects. He gives away clues." Clues. The word reverberated through me. "What does that mean?" I asked. He stepped closer, and I instinctively backed up until the bookshelf pressed into my spine. The man lowered his voice to a near whisper. "Jonas isn't who you think he is. He's been searching for you for a long time." My stomach flipped. "Why me?" "Because you're the last person tied to what happened 20 years ago." His eyes never left mine. "And Jonas believes you're the only one who can finish what he started." My throat went dry. 20 years ago? The same time my brother vanished. The same night I lost the locket. The night that dismantled what was left of my family. "I don't know anything about that," I said, my voice trembling despite my effort to stay in control. The man stepped even closer. "You will." At that moment, Daniel returned from the back room, a box of books in his arms. "Oh, hey, can I help you with something?" Daniel asked politely. The man's demeanor shifted instantly, face softening, posture relaxing, a perfect mimic of normalcy. "No, thank you. I was just leaving," he said. He gave me one final look, an unspoken warning, then walked out of the store, the bell chiming innocently as he disappeared into the cold. I sagged against the bookshelf, breath shaking. "Daniel, are you sure you're okay? You look pale." I forced a weak smile. "Just tired." But inside, panic was clawing at me. Jonas, Adrian, the man from the alley, the locket, my brother. The past wasn't just resurfacing, it was hunting me. But the true shock came an hour later when someone slipped a handwritten note under my front door that contained only 5 words. He didn't disappear, he ran. By the time I made it home, my nerves were frayed so thin I could almost hear them humming. The walk back was a blur. I kept replaying the bookstore encounter in my mind, the man's calm voice, the way he had said, "us," like it meant something powerful, organized, dangerous. My small house felt like a sanctuary when I stepped inside, warm, familiar, quiet. I locked the door immediately, checking it twice, then 3 times. I didn't care if it made me seem paranoid. After the morning I'd had, paranoia felt like common sense. I set my coat on the hook and was halfway to the kitchen to make tea when something caught my eye on the floor near the entryway. A folded piece of paper. Thin, white, no envelope. My heart dropped. I knelt slowly, as if the note might explode with sudden movement. It hadn't been there when I'd left, which meant someone had come to my door after I'd gone out. I unfolded it with trembling fingers. 5 words were scrawled across the page in sharp, hurried handwriting. He didn't disappear, he ran. My vision blurred for a moment, breath lodged in my chest. He. My brother, Evan. The words pulsed in my mind, dredging up memories I'd spent half my life trying to bury. 20 years ago, he'd gone missing after an argument with our father. They'd fought about something I was never told, something too adult, something our parents whispered about behind closed doors.
One moment, Evan had stormed out of the house into the rain. The next, he was gone. No trace, no clues, no explanation. The police had searched for weeks. Posters were hung. News crews came and went. My mother stopped sleeping. My father stopped talking. And I stopped believing he'd ever come home. But he didn't disappear. He ran? From what? From who? Toward who? I sank onto the stairs, staring at the note, my pulse echoing in my ears. Questions churned inside me like a storm refusing to break. Who left this? Adrian? He had warned me people were watching, but this handwriting didn't match his neat, controlled aura. The man from the alley? Possible, but why give me a puzzle piece instead of taking the locket? Jonas? Was this part of what he wanted me to know? Or was it Evan himself? That thought sent a tremor through me so strong I had to grip the banister to steady myself. Could my brother be alive? Had he been alive this whole time? If so, why reach out now? I read the note again, and again, and again. Each rereading felt like a door creaking open to a dark room I wasn't sure I wanted to enter. I stood abruptly and went to the windows, peeking out through the curtains. The street was quiet, too quiet. Snow-muffled sound softening everything except the pounding in my head. If Evan ran, he had a reason. If someone wanted me to know that now, they had a reason. And if Jonas had my locket, this wasn't just about kindness. This was about connection. The past wasn't a memory anymore. It was a map. And someone wanted me to follow it. But before I could decide what to do next, my phone rang, and the caller ID showed a name I hadn't seen in decades, one I never thought would appear on my screen again. The phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, its vibration slicing through the silence like a blade. I flinched so hard the note slipped from my fingers and drifted to the floor. I wasn't expecting a call, not from anyone, not today. But when I turned and saw the caller ID, my knees nearly gave out. Evan Hayes. My brother's name. My heart pounded wildly, like it was trying to break free from my chest. I stared at the screen, frozen, my breath coming in short, uneven bursts. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be him. His number had been disconnected 2 decades ago. My parents had canceled the line when it became clear he wasn't coming home. This had to be a trick, a scam, a coincidence. But there it was, his name glowing back at me. The phone vibrated again. Finally, I forced myself to answer. Hello? My voice cracked. Silence. Then, a faint static hum. Soft, distant, like wind against an old microphone. I pressed the phone closer to my ear. Who is this? Another pause. Then, Mara. A single word. Just one. But it was his voice. Older, rougher, but unquestionably Evan. My legs buckled, and I gripped the counter for support. Evan? Where are you? He exhaled sharply, as if even breathing cost him something. I don't have much time. Oh my God. Evan, are you okay? What happened to you? Why did you... Mara, listen. He cut in, his voice trembling with urgency. Whatever they told you, whatever you think happened, it wasn't like that. My head spun. Who? Who told me what? They're watching you now. You need to leave the house right away. Do not stay there. Cold prickled across my skin. Who's watching me? I whispered. Static warped the call, his voice fading in and out. They're after the locket. They think you know what it means. You don't. Not yet. But you will. I pressed a hand to my forehead, heart racing. Evan, please. Where are you? Let me come get you. You can't. And don't trust Adrian. He's not what he seems. I froze. Adrian, the calm, controlled man who said he was trying to help me? Was he lying? Was everyone lying? Evan, please tell me what's going on. I'll explain everything, he said, voice breaking. But you need to move. Now. Before... The line crackled violently. Evan! Evan! A final burst of static exploded through the speaker. Then the call dropped. No goodbye. No explanation. Just silence. I stood in the kitchen, shaking, staring at the darkened screen. My brother was alive. He had run, not disappeared. And now he was warning me that danger was already at my door. I scrambled to grab my purse, my coat, the locket. My mind raced as I shoved my keys into my pocket. If Evan was watching me, someone else was too. I opened the front door and froze. Footprints. Fresh ones, leading directly to my porch. And when I followed the trail with my eyes, they didn't lead away from the house. They stopped right at my window.
The cold air slapped my face as I stepped onto the porch. My breath fogged in front of me, rising like smoke as I stared at the fresh footprints stamped into the snow. Large, heavy impressions that didn't belong to me. They led straight to my window, and then stopped. Not turning away, not retreating, just ending there, like the person had stood and watched me through the glass for who knows how long. A chill crawled up my spine. I crept forward, heart hammering, following the trail as though it might suddenly continue if I looked hard enough. But no, even up close, the snow told the same story. Someone had approached deliberately, quietly, directly, and then vanished. Or worse, they were still nearby. I forced myself to look slowly around the yard, scanning the corners, the shadows, the line of trees behind my fence. Everything was silent except for the faint whistle of the wind. Think, Mara. Evan's voice still rang in my mind. You need to leave the house right away. He had sounded terrified. Terrified for me. Terrified of whoever wanted the locket. I pressed a hand to my coat pocket, feeling the weight of the cloth-wrapped piece of metal. How could something so small generate so much danger? I backed toward my car, eyes darting from shadow to shadow. My hands trembled as I unlocked the door and slipped inside, locking it immediately. My breath came quick and uneven, fogging the interior glass. Where was I supposed to go? Evan hadn't said. Just to leave. I stared at the street ahead, snow still drifting lazily down. Every instinct screamed at me to drive, but another instinct, one just as strong, told me that running without direction was exactly what they wanted.
I pulled out my phone to call Evan back, but the screen showed no service. "What?" I whispered. My phone had never lost service here, not once. I lifted it higher, angled it toward the windshield, even turned it off and on. Nothing. No signal at all. My stomach twisted. Was it interference or deliberate? I shoved the phone back into my bag and put the key into the ignition. The car rumbled to life, heater sputtering as warm air began to slowly fill the cabin. Then, a sharp tap on the window. My entire body jerked. Someone was standing right outside the driver's side door. I turned my head slowly, pulse pounding so loudly I could barely hear anything over it. But when I saw the face through the frosted glass, the fear inside me didn't fade. It grew. The man leaned down, peering into the car with eyes that held no warmth at all. Not anger, not urgency, just certainty. He mouthed 2 words through the glass, slow enough that I understood them perfectly. Give it. The locket. He wanted the locket. I shook my head instinctively, gripping the steering wheel. His expression hardened. He raised one gloved hand and placed something against the window. Not a weapon, not a tool. A photograph. A photograph of me, taken from outside my house, taken through my kitchen window, taken earlier today. My blood ran cold. Then he tapped the photo with his finger, smiled faintly, and whispered a name that shouldn't have been possible for him to know. My brother's.
His breath formed pale clouds on the glass as he leaned closer, the photo still pressed against my window. The faint smile he wore wasn't cruel. It was confident, certain, as if he already knew how this would end. Then he whispered it. My brother's name. Evan. I froze. It felt like someone had poured ice water through my veins. My hand slipped from the steering wheel, the world shrinking to the shape of his mouth, forming that impossible word. He shouldn't have known that name. He couldn't have known that name. Unless this was bigger, far bigger than anything I understood. My instinct screamed to lock the doors again, even though they were already locked, to drive, to run him over if I had to. But fear pinned me in place. He tapped the photo once more, deliberate, slow. Give it, he mouthed again. The locket. My pulse raced, a frantic drum against my ribs. I shook my head again, not out of bravery, but habit. The only defense I had left was refusing. His faint smile vanished. He lowered the photograph and slid it into his coat. Then he reached into his pocket again, and for a split second, I thought he was pulling out a weapon. I braced myself, heart slamming painfully against my chest. But what he brought out wasn't a weapon. It was another photograph. And when he held it up, my breath caught so sharply I almost choked. It was Evan, but not 20 years ago. Now. Older, rougher, gaunt, with tired eyes and unshaven cheeks, wearing a hooded jacket that looked exactly like the one he must have been wearing when he called me. He stood beside a chain-link fence in an industrial area I didn't recognize, but he was alive. Undeniably alive. And the man outside my car had this photo? He tapped the picture of Evan, then pointed at me. A message. He knows where my brother is. Or worse, he has him. My panic twisted into something sharper, desperation. I turned the engine on fully and gripped the steering wheel. The man's expression hardened again. No rage, no fear, just a silent calculation. He stepped back one pace, then another, as if giving me room to choose, or daring me to make the wrong choice. I shifted the car into reverse. He watched me calmly, head tilted slightly. He wasn't worried. That terrified me more than anything.
It meant he was certain I couldn't outrun whatever he represented. I backed out of the driveway fast, tires skidding on the snow. The man didn't chase me. He didn't move at all. He just stood there, watching as I sped down the street. When I glanced in the rearview mirror, he was still there, dark silhouette against the white snow, hands in his pockets, waiting. For what? For me to come back? For me to fail? For me to hand over the locket? My phone buzzed suddenly, signal restored. I grabbed it, my hand still shaking. One new message from a blocked number. Do not give them the locket. -E. My heart lurched. Evan! But how did he know what just happened? How was he watching me? Was he close? Or was someone else watching everything? Before I could respond, another message came through. You're running out of time. And before I could even breathe, headlights flared in my rearview mirror, too close, too fast, and I realized I wasn't driving alone on that snowy road anymore.
The headlights behind me were blinding, two sharp beams cutting through the snowfall, growing larger with terrifying speed. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened, my breath fogging the inside of the windshield. Someone was following me. No, chasing me. The car swerved slightly in the road, weaving just enough to make its intention unmistakable. I slammed my foot on the accelerator. My engine roared, though it struggled against the slick snow. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, my heart hammering with each passing second. The pursuing vehicle, a dark SUV, didn't slow or shrink. It surged forward, staying dangerously close. Too close. I took the first turn I saw, a sharp right onto a narrower street lined with parked cars. Snowbanks hugged both sides, creating only a single lane. Not ideal, but it was my only chance to lose them. The SUV followed. Of course it did. I sped up again, the tires sliding slightly on the icy pavement. One wrong move and I'd be spinning out. The houses on both sides blurred into streaks of white and gray. Another message buzzed on my phone, still in the cup holder. Don't go home. Don't stop. Trust me. E. I didn't have time to type back. Didn't have time to think. The SUV accelerated, closing the gap until its headlights filled my mirror again. My stomach twisted. They could ram me, force me off the road, take the locket, take me. My eyes scanned the street ahead, desperate, for anything resembling an escape route. Then I saw it. A narrow service road branching off the main street, partially hidden by a snowbank. It was the kind of road delivery trucks used to reach the old industrial buildings behind the warehouses. Most people didn't even know it existed, but I did. Evan and I used to play there as kids before it was fenced off. I slammed the wheel left and veered toward the opening. The SUV overshot the turn slightly, its tires skidding on the fresh snow. It tried to correct, fishtailing before managing to realign and follow. But now I had seconds, maybe less. I floored the gas. My engine roared, though it struggled against the slick snow. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, my heart hammering with each passing second. The pursuing vehicle, a dark SUV, didn't slow or shrink. It surged forward, staying dangerously close. Too close. I took the first turn I saw, a sharp right onto a narrower street lined with parked cars. Snowbanks hugged both sides, creating only a single lane. Not ideal, but it was my only chance to lose them. The SUV followed. Of course it did. I sped up again, the tires sliding slightly on the icy pavement. One wrong move and I'd be spinning out. The houses on both sides blurred into streaks of white and gray. Another message buzzed on my phone, still in the cup holder. Don't go home. Don't stop. Trust me. E. I didn't have time to type back. Didn't have time to think. The SUV accelerated, closing the gap until its headlights filled my mirror again. My stomach twisted. They could ram me, force me off the road, take the locket, take me. My eyes scanned the street ahead, desperate for anything resembling an escape route. Then I saw it. A narrow service road branching off the main street, partially hidden by a snowbank. It was the kind of road delivery trucks used to reach the old industrial buildings behind the warehouses. Most people didn't even know it existed, but I did. Evan and I used to play there as kids before it was fenced off. I slammed the wheel left and veered toward the opening.
The SUV overshot the turn slightly, its tires skidding on the fresh snow. It tried to correct, fishtailing before managing to realign and follow, but now I had seconds, maybe less. I floored the gas. The car jolted forward. The road tightened, lined with tall chain-link fences and broken streetlights. It looked like a tunnel of rust and shadow. My headlights carved a narrow path through the darkness. Then, the cold punch of realization. This road didn't loop back to the main street. It ended. A dead end. I just trapped myself. Panic surged, clawing up my throat. I scanned the sides of the road, searching desperately for an exit, a break in the fence, anything. There. A narrow gate hanging off its hinges, half buried in snow. Barely wide enough for my car. Barely. I didn't think, I just turned. Metal scraped violently against metal as my car tore through the opening. My side mirror snapped off, flying somewhere into the darkness. I didn't care. I kept going. Behind me, the SUV braked hard. The road was too tight, the gate too narrow. They couldn't follow me without getting stuck. For the first time since this nightmare started, I had a sliver of distance, a sliver of hope. My car burst out into a clearing, an abandoned loading yard full of crumbling concrete, rusted barrels, and snowdrifts. I slammed on the brakes, sending my car skidding sideways until it finally stopped. My breath shook. My fingers trembled, but I was alive. I grabbed my phone. Another message blinked onto the screen. "You're close. Don't be afraid. Keep going. E." Close to what? Close to him? I swallowed hard and stepped out of the car, the icy wind hitting my face. And then I saw it. At the far end of the yard, half hidden behind a collapsed fence, a figure stood waiting. And when the figure stepped forward into the moonlight, it wasn't Evan. It was someone I hadn't seen since the night he vanished.
For a moment, I couldn't move. The figure stood at the far end of the loading yard, still, silent, cloaked in shadows. But as they stepped forward into the thin strip of moonlight, my breath caught in my throat. It wasn't Evan. It wasn't Adrian. It wasn't the man from the alley. It was her. My father's old research assistant. The woman who appeared at our home the night Evan vanished. The woman whose warning had echoed in my memory for decades. If he leaves, don't go after him. Her name rose from some deep place inside me, sharp and unwelcome. Dr. Lynn Mercer? She looked older now, maybe in her 60s, with streaks of silver running through her once black hair. But her eyes, cold, focused, oddly gentle, were exactly the same as I remembered. She raised her hand slightly, palms open. "Mara, I'm glad you made it." My muscles locked. "Why are you here? What do you want?" She didn't flinch at the hostility in my voice. "The same thing I wanted 20 years ago, to keep you safe." A bitter laugh escaped me. "Safe? My brother disappeared because of you." Dr. Mercer's expression, usually unreadable, clinical, cracked for just a second. A flicker of something like sadness crossed her face. Evan didn't disappear. He ran because he found something he was never meant to see. My heart hammered. "That's what the note said." She nodded slowly. I left it. My breath hitched. "You were at my house?" "Yes. I needed to warn you before they arrived." "They? Who's they?" "The man who came to my car, the one with the photo of Evan." Dr. Mercer's jaw tightened. "They're part of a network your father used to work with. People who believe your family still holds the key to something they want, desperately." "My father?" I swallowed hard. "He never mentioned anything like that." "He couldn't. He didn't want you or Evan pulled into it. But when your brother stumbled onto one of his classified projects..." "What kind of project?" She hesitated. "What kind of project?" I demanded, my voice cracking. "A genetic algorithm," she said quietly, "designed to track lineage traits through generations. It wasn't meant for what they turned it into. What did they turn it into? A targeting tool. Her voice went flat. To identify people with rare inherited markers. People like Evan. People like you. The cold wind suddenly felt suffocating. I'm lying, I whispered. I wish I were. My knees weakened. I braced myself against my car door. She stepped closer. Evan ran to protect you. He took your locket the night he left because it carried one of the earliest samples your father stored. Jonas retrieved it years later, and when Evan couldn't return it himself, he asked Jonas to wait for the right moment. And that moment is now? My voice sounded small. Yes, because they finally found you. I felt dizzy. Why? I don't have the algorithm. I don't know anything. No, she said gently, but you carry the one thing more valuable than the data. What could that possibly be? She looked directly into my eyes. Proof. Proof of what? That your family's project worked. Before I could respond, a snapping crunch echoed through the yard, footsteps closing in fast behind us. Dr. Mercer's head whipped toward the sound. They're here, she whispered, and before I could turn, cold hands grabbed me from behind, pulling me backward into the darkness.
Hands clamped around my arms, strong, unyielding, gloved. I gasped, twisting instinctively, but whoever held me was far stronger. My feet scraped helplessly against the icy concrete as I was yanked backward into the shadows. Dr. Mercer shouted something, my name, I think, but her voice was swallowed by the roar of blood in my ears. I tried to scream. A hand slammed over my mouth. Quiet, a voice hissed. You'll make this worse. The fear that surged through me was primal, hot, suffocating, blinding. But then, just as quickly, something snapped in my mind. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't a child. I bent forward just enough to gather my balance and drove my heel backward. I hit something solid. The man behind me grunted. I twisted my arm hard, breaking his grip long enough to spin around. My eyes adjusted to the darkness and froze. It was the man from my driveway, the one with the photos, the one who knew Evan's name. His jaw clenched as he stepped forward again, unbothered by the blow I'd landed. You need to stop running, he said calmly. Let her go! Dr. Mercer's voice echoed across the yard as she rushed toward us. He reached into his coat. I flinched, expecting a weapon, but instead, he held up the same photograph he'd shown me earlier, Evan standing near the chain-link fence. You want him alive? The man asked quietly. Then stop fighting. My breath caught. What do you mean, alive? What have you done to him? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The implication hung between us like a blade. Dr. Mercer stepped in, placing herself between us. You don't have authority anymore, Hale. You know that, so step aside before you escalate something you can't contain. Hale. The name landed like a stone in my stomach. He tilted his head. You're overestimating your position. Again. It's not about positions. She shot him a look sharp enough to cut through steel. It's about Mara. She's not part of this. She is now, Hale said, eyes flicking toward me. Whether she wants to be or not. I wanted to yell, to demand answers, but my throat tightened with terror and confusion. He reached toward me again, and then, a distant rumble, low, growing louder. Headlights burst across the yard, cutting through the darkness. A truck barreled toward us, engine growling, tires skidding across the snow. Hale stepped back, momentarily blinded by the glare.
Dr. Mercer grabbed my arm and yanked me to the side as the truck slid to a stop between us. The driver's door flew open. A man jumped out, hood up, face shadowed. For a terrifying moment, I thought it was another stranger. Then he spoke. "Mara, get in." My heart stopped. I knew that voice. I'd heard it through static, through 20 years of silence. "Evan!" I stared, frozen. "Evan, is it really?" "No time," he shouted. "Move!" Dr. Mercer pushed me forward. I stumbled into the truck, slamming the door shut as Evan floored the gas. The tires spun wildly before gripping the ground. The truck shot forward, fishtailing through the snow. I looked back through the rear window. Hale stood in the blizzard's glare, unmoving, watching us disappear into the night. Not defeated, not afraid, just waiting. As the yard vanished behind us, Evan finally spoke, voice tight, breath shaky. "There's something you need to know, Mara, something Dad tried to protect us from." I turned toward him, heart pounding. "What is it?" I whispered. He glanced at me, eyes haunted. "You're not the only one they're after. They're coming for all of us."